Good evening, everyone. I'm Chandler Farabee, the program manager for the Virginia Film Festival. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for Beyond the Screen, a conversation with CJ Hunt on the neutral ground, moderated by Daniel Fairley II. This event is a collaboration with POV, the award-winning independent nonfiction film series on PBS. And we also would like to thank our presenting sponsor of the Beyond the Screen series, the Jefferson Trust, for their generous support of this event, as well as all Beyond the Screen events this year. CJ Hunt is a comedian and filmmaker living in New York. He is currently a field producer on the Daily Show with Trevor Noah. He has also served as a staff writer for A&E's Black and White and a field producer for BET's The Rundown with Robin Teedy. Before working in late night, CJ spent 9 years living in New Orleans, where in 2015, he began filming what he thought would be a quick and easy Confederate monument removal. CJ is an alumnus of Firelight Media's Doc Lab and New Orleans Film Festival's Emerging Voices program. He is also a 2020 New America Fellow and a regular host of The Moth. A graduate from Brown University's Africana Studies Department, CJ is endlessly fascinated by race and comedy's ability to say what we can't. Daniel Fairley II serves as the Youth Opportunity Coordinator focused on Black male achievement for the city of Charlottesville, Virginia. He earned his bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of Richmond in 2013. In January 2014, Daniel began interning in the operations department of the White House during the Obama administration. While there, he coordinated bi-weekly accessibility and inclusivity meetings with stakeholders throughout the White House. Afterward, he attended the University of Vermont to earn a master's degree in higher education and student affairs administration. In December 2017, Daniel accepted his current position to work with Black youth and create targeted programs to support their achievement. Daniel also serves as the president of the 100 Black Men of Central Virginia. He is a board member for Loaves and Fish's Food Pantry and is a steering committee member for the University of Virginia Equity Center. With that, I'm happy to throw it to Daniel to keep this conversation on.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chandler. It's good to see you again. And welcome, everyone. So as Chandler said, I'm Daniel Fairley. I'm a Youth Opportunity Coordinator, also on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee for the Virginia Film Festival. And it is my pleasure to be here with CJ Hunt. CJ, how are you doing today?
Daniel, it's my pleasure to be here with you.
Thanks, I appreciate that. I didn't make a film. Well, I guess I kind of did, but it wasn't as good as yours. So, so just thank you everyone for being here with us. Just a quick reminder that the Q&A function does exist, so you all can use that, submit your questions, and then we'll be answering those near the end of the program. But just to get started, CJ, I don't know if you know this, I was going through some of our history. We actually have a lot of things in common. So my dad actually grew up in the lower Ninth Ward of New Orleans. And so he grew up there, went to McDonough High School. My grandmother lived in lower Ninth Ward up until Katrina, and now lives over in Mississippi. So like, that's just like my New Orleans, like my entire dad's side of the family is all from New Orleans. And I go there all the time.
Which McDonough did he go to?
Oh gosh, I remember he had to test into it. And this was like probably in like the 70s.
Have you in thinking about statues and, justice and, the movements recently, have you ever talked to him about the name of that school?
I haven't actually. He was always proud to go there because it was like a school he had to test into, but he's never mentioned anything about the name.
Yeah, so it's like a perfect starting place for our convo of like what it means that Black students graduate from schools that they're proud of, but that those schools are also named, in McDonough's case, after a slave owner. Right. So
right.
It's like the after the 4 monuments were moved in 2017, in 2020, we saw a statue of McDonough get torn down in front of City Hall and thrown in the river. So it's this. Yeah, I think that's like a perfect starting place for the convo of like, it's a dichotomy of the places that are common, the places that we should feel proud of also happen to be named after people who would have been like, get back in the field.
Right. That's so crazy. Because I know I even saw there's a flash of it in the movie, right? I saw like there's a flash of McDonough High School in the movie.
It's at the end.
And I was just kind of like,
we show the high school at the beginning, and we show the statue taking a swim at the end.
Oh, that's what that was. Okay. Yeah. I mean, there were so many statues. That's amazing. So like, speaking of that, like, tell me where this all started for you. Like, just kind of, again, like this was supposed to be, and you can kind of see in the beginning of the movie, it was more like kind of comedic, or you trying to like, through the office, like looking into the camera, like, tell me about the beginnings of it and then kind of how it transformed throughout the process.
I love the frame of the question of like, tell me when you thought this might be The Office, and tell me when you're like terrified for your life.
Yeah.
These white supremacists. I mean, the look is the
Yeah.
same, right? Okay, so I moved to New Orleans in 2007, right after college, and I moved there to become a teacher. And after I was teaching in the classroom, I stayed on and started teaching after school. But I was teaching comedy, started working for the public defender's office, and really just sort of trying to figure out what my life was going to be. I knew I wanted to do comedy in some form. And so by 2007, I was just sort of trying to make a lot of satire and a lot of comedy. And for me, comedy is like, it's part of just my anger response system. It's, when something awful happens, I will be upset like all of us. But then part of me is like, okay, how do I be useful? How do I be useful in this situation? And kind of the only thing that I'm useful at is trying to think about how to use comedy to capture whiteness or white supremacy in some way that we can all see, right? So I kind of respond to racists like some people respond to lightning bugs. You're like, oh my God, you are just out here in public, this many, just unabashed, so I'm like, let's find a jar. We got to find a jar to capture this, and so we can all talk about what this is. And so for me, comedy is the jar. In this case, film was the jar. I didn't know it was going to be a film at the time. So it was just literally like, hey, people are not telling the truth about the Confederacy. It has been a condition of living in New Orleans, but it is now elevated in a way that we can all see, and we can see what's in the jar, given that we have white legislators on the floor talking about how, we should put the flag back up after Bree Newsom took it down. And it's all of our heritage. And even as that convo is moving to New Orleans, the group that would become Take 'em Down is marching in the streets. And Mitch Landrieu's like, I'll lend my power to that. Even then, you could still feel the backlash sort of brewing. So for me, I was just like, okay, this will be a comedy about how ridiculous, how asinine, how extreme that backlash is going to be. I just miscalculated on how extreme that backlash was going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you'd mentioned before about the lost cause narrative. I had a quick quiz I wanted to give you about the three tenets of the lost cause narrative.
Let's quiz, baby.
So what's the first tenet?
Okay, so for those who are new to the lost cause is like the OG big lie, right? Like now, before this was difficult to explain to folks because they were like, what do you mean propaganda that's been there forever? But like now we've seen a big lie born in front of our face, right? Like we've seen an old white man go, what you saw happen with your own eyes did not happen. They were not insurrectionists. In fact, they were patriots, that they were not attacking the government. They were speaking out for their own freedoms. So we've seen that. So just imagine how bad that was and how strong that impulse to create a myth would be in the very public, undeniable defeat of the white South. That's what happened. That before the war, in 1860 and 61, in those winters, these dudes are out on Front Street being like, Mississippi firmly identifies with the institution of slavery, the greatest material wealth on earth. Louisiana firmly looks forward to the formation of a Southern Confederacy to preserve African slavery, right? Like they're saying the thing. Yeah. After the war, they start spinning. So the number one, if we asked this question to historian Christy Coleman, it didn't make the film ultimately, but if the Lost Cause was a platinum album, track one, and it had 3 tracks, track one would be called It Wasn't About Slavery.
Nope.
Right? Track 2 would be called It Was About States' Rights. And then track 3, which is just sort of like a spin-off skit of track 1, is also Slavery Was Pretty Fine. That those are the main tracks. There are some other B-side hits like loyal slaves willingly fought for the Confederacy. There's another B-side hit that's like Robert E. Lee was the best military general ever. There's another
Right.
B-side hit that's like, we didn't lose because we were bad at warfare. We lost because we were militarily overrun. But the ones that you hear the most are, it wasn't about slavery. It was about states' rights. And also slavery was kind of fun for those slaves.
Right. Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, they had healthcare, right?
And healthcare. we are laughing, but these are things that people said to my face for 5 years of,
Wow.
you know, like there's a civility to it when you're lucky of people will say to your face, actually, the first thing people will say is, you know what? Everywhere had slavery. You know, Egypt had slaves. Every advanced society has had slavery, right? And that person has sort of an argument that's dressed up in some fine clothes. And then if you
Right.
spend just 5 minutes with them, they will move on to also it was about states' rights, you know, our freedom. We just who doesn't want to be owned besides the slaves? You know, we wanted freedom.
Right.
And then if you spend any more time, they will like within 5 minutes, folks will eventually get to also slavery wasn't that bad. And I
Wow.
think that is a clarifying moment for what all of this defense of the lost cause and Confederate memorabilia is of. If your good friend Daniel was like, my wife just divorced me, it wasn't about cheating. On a separate note, cheating's not that bad. You'd be like, what?
Yeah.
You'd be like, hold on, Craig, what are we talking about? If it's not about slavery, can we say that slavery is the worst thing ever and it still haunts us in our institutions? No, we can't say that. Oh, what's the other thing you want to say? Oh, slavery was kind of tight. It's like, what are we talking about?
It's so true. I mean, it's incredible to see. And I thought it was really, I thought it was funny that they, as you were there and during the Civil War reenactment, and you were talking to the people and you're like, cool, like I'm on the Union side. Like, obviously, like that's where, you know what I mean, where you'd want to be, right? And then you're talking to the guys and they're like, oh yeah, we're the bad guys. And you're like, wait, what? Like, we're the bad guys right here? Like, we're the Union, we're America. How are we
Yeah.
defending this, right?
Yeah. I mean, I
That's
grew
just
up I grew up in Boston and New York where, you know, we're the good guys. You know, we're the guys who cared about slavery from the beginning. Not true. That's part of
right.
that's part of the Union myth, but you know, in Civil War reenactment, which they call the hobby, according to the men I spoke to in this film, the Union is the least fun side to play because everyone roots for an underdog. And in wrestling, it's kind of like the character of the heel. It's really fun to play the heel. And who wants to play liberators? It's much
God.
more fun to be those rebels who are fighting against tyranny and also owning people.
Right. Wow. That's so incredible. I mean, so you had visited a couple different places, and the kind of like the three main places, at least the ones that connected most with me, were New Orleans, Richmond, and Charlottesville. Right. So you have New Orleans, kind of where you were based. You were with Take 'Em Down Nola, like working, like talking to them, going through the streets and everything like that. Richmond being, so I went to school in Richmond, University of Richmond. And so I ran like the Monument Avenue 10K, and like I knew all, you know, just
Okay, was it messed up for you then? Like,
so it was like I couldn't like I tried to explain to people. I was like, no, it's not just that I live in the capital of the Confederacy. Like, when you drive down this monument, like, you have not seen statues this tall before. There's 20 feet of just cement and then a statue on top of that, right? Like, these are things that like you can't grasp just how much they are like implanted into this city and how much they are there to show this force, right? As to how incredible and how like we just revere these people. And knowing Stonewall Jackson's course's name, and there's still, they just recently changed them from Stonewall Jackson Middle School and Robert E. Lee, you know what I mean? And like just Lee Davis High School, right? There's still schools and things like that have been recently changed. But it kind of gets back to your other point about the naming of things is not just the statues as well.
if you could use one word to describe how those monuments, we flipped the interview, bro.
I know, it seems like it. I'm like, oh my God.
If you could use one word for those statues that are in the neutral ground in Richmond, what would you use? I would use gods. They are built to feel like gods. They are built to feel like I felt like I was looking at like the ship in Independence Day or something. They
That's what
take
I'm
up
saying.
so much. For folks who have not seen these, it is not like a monument in a graveyard. They take up
Right.
so much space. They are so gargantuan. The Jefferson Davis monument has all of this like fake Greek architecture behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Another, if the earth ended tomorrow, uh, another civilization would come and be like, these were clearly the gods of this nation.
Absolutely. I mean, they're so huge. And I think actually gets me to my another point that, and this is gonna be later on in the interview, but since it's flipped, I mean, like this is the word that I would use would be like insurmountable, right? That's the word that I
Yes.
thought of when I was there. I was like, there is no denying this. There is no like these are the lightning bugs, right? These are like the oh my God, this is really here. Like so those were slave owners. I'm explaining to these people as we're driving down Monument Avenue, trying to be like, oh, cute, there's a tacky light tour, or like, oh, it's a run. But it's like, no, like these were literal slave owners that wished me dead. And like, you know what I mean? And like that's who is up above everything else, right? You like there's nothing taller on that street than those statues. And it's like those just seem like they were unquestioned the amount of authority and power that they had over that city, and kind of like the what it showed right to the people that were there, like this is what matters the most, right? This is what we believe in the most, this is what we've invested the most in and what we want to preserve the most. And honestly, like what,
Implacable,
yeah, oh
implacable,
yeah, oh
insurmountable.
absolutely.
Like those are all. I think that is what you're absolutely right. That a lot of folks on this Zoom know that the Lee Monument itself was intentionally meant to anchor a brand new community that grew up around Monument Avenue, right? That
Mm-hmm.
like this will be a whole like if you build it, they will come. This will be the new pillar. And we wanted to start
Right.
the film actually with just shots of joggers. And
Mm.
it's interesting that you mentioned that, just because it's like it's not just that these are slave owners. It's not just that
Mm-hmm.
they are traders. It's not just that they are the most giant monuments most southern cities have. It is that they are placed in the middle of everything and purport to be neutral and
Right.
purport to be immovable, and that they're just supposed to be part of your everyday, so that the
Mm-hmm.
most common interaction folks have with these things is just jogging by them. And there was something so insane about that to me, the idea that we would build a monument to Harvey Weinstein or Hitler or any of these
Mm.
people that we
Right.
find publicly objectionable, and just be like, no, it's always been here, just jog by it, just have a picnic by it. There's
Yeah,
like an implied,
absolutely.
there's like a coerced consent. It's like, well, if you're jogging by
Mm.
it, and if the bike race happens, if Mardi Gras happens, if people come to Stone
Right.
Mountain Park, most of the people who come here are black. Like these are the arguments,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a coerced consent that, like, of course we must consent to it if it's built in the middle of our spaces.
Right. I mean, it's incredible to think of the ways in which we have been. Again, like the further that we've gotten away, it took some people like Zion O'Brien and other people to just kind of say, we know this is wrong, right? We know that we walk by this every day knowing that it's wrong. Why has no one changed that, right? Why has no one said anything about that? Why has no one fought back to say we don't want this statue, we don't revere this person? And I think that that's just kind of like the point in which we're in, which I'm really happy and proud to be here, right? I'm happy that there's films like yours that are being able to say like let's document this process of not just what happened when they went up, but also what happened when they go down, right? The kind of the life story of these statues.
That's the beauty and the tragedy, is that you can say Zion Bryant's name in the same sentence as Jelaine Schmidt's name, right? Like these
Mm-hmm.
are folks of different generations. Like Zy Bryant should have never had to say anything. The idea that like you can just have a museum of all the black women who've been saying since these damn things went up, why
Mm-hmm.
is this here? So yeah, I think there is a world of movies and storytelling and tours that are happening now. They're able to
Mm-hmm.
frame this not just as this is objectionable, it has always been objectionable, it has never been neutral, but also black people have resisted this from the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, it's so important to fight, and it was really interesting because I've been at city council meetings here in Charlottesville, and I remember one going like to Parks and Rec. They were like, "Oh, when we were filming Parks and Rec, we were trying to decide how we were going to show city council meetings. We just started attending random city council meetings, and then you would see kind of like I don't know, just the complete strangeness that encapsulates a city council meeting around random topics, and then let alone put in a contentious topic into a city council meeting. And you're going to see people. I mean, we would have like water bottle crinklers, coffers, things of just kind of people that were outright, I am a son of Robert E. Lee, and I'm proud of it. I want to make sure that we have these up. Or I spoke at a city council meeting just thinking that, I was voicing my opinion about taking the statues down. And I was like in the route the next week. And I was like, this is just my city council.
Yeah, all of a sudden it's like red
yeah.
carpet. And you're like, literally, there are Cheez-It wrappers on the floor.
Yeah.
There are people sleeping here. I mean, yeah, but for real, it is not only a place of wild characters, and it is not only a place where, the meetings, we begin the film, every film has an artificial beginning, and we begin this film not in the 1970s with the NAACP, right, or not with, folks like Avery Alexander, Marie Galatas, or even Bree Newsom, but because we only have 82 minutes, we begin the film with the meeting of the city council in New Orleans. And we begin it so that the audience feels emotionally what we felt as filmmakers of, you watch the first 3 minutes of The Neutral Ground and you see that city council meeting, and you see the sort of terror and spitfire in some of these older white folks who are just like, this is our history. What will happen to us if it goes down? And, saying out loud, the veil of, the veil sometimes slips, like moments like where you're like, your slip is showing of, yeah, there's no propriety or pretense of civility in white supremacist talk. It is literally just saying, these monuments are not oppressive. What is oppressive is when black thugs beat up a tourist, or, a man outright saying, our opposition here wants you to believe that these monuments are oppressive, and there's nothing oppressive about it. And sort of the audacity, or, yeah, Gen Zers would say the caucasity of of folks hearing their black neighbors get up one after the other and say, this hurts me. My kids can't look at this. This is someone who would have enslaved all of us, all people who look like me. Right. And then the audacity to stand up after that and say, you're wrong. That's not what it is. To me, that is what we wanted to make a film about. I think some moderates want to be like, so the film is about how divided we are as people and how we really need to come to the neutral ground. It's like, no. We are being ironic with the notion of the neutral ground. The film is about how can we ever talk about a neutral ground when there are folks so lost in white supremacy that they will say, I am blind to history. I am blind to any empathy about what you are saying, and I am subverting the mechanisms of democracy just because I want to hang on to a story.
Yeah, it's something that's so tragic to know. I mean, there was a part in the film where you're talking to an historian, and she mentions how they needed these statues to kind of say, like, if we fought this war without having anything to show for it, like, it was all for nothing, right? If we fought the Civil War and we have nothing to show for it, then it was worthless, right? We didn't get our slaves, we didn't get these whatever mythical states' rights that we wanted. Like,
we gotta work now.
Right.
Imagine those of you who are like, ooh, it's cushy for me to work at home. Imagine not working ever because your whole economy runs on other people doing all the work. So then being like, dang, so I got to learn how to farm.
I have all this land. I have to
Yes.
They were out of it. They were totally out of it, right? And then I was like the initial bump, right, of like right afterwards during Reconstruction, kind of like throwing up the statues, and then like later on in like the 50s, 60s, 70s of like the planting of the flags and saying, we are still going to remember this. We are not going to let, during these times, these two specific times of both civil rights in the 1960s as well as like Reconstruction and like the late 1800s of being like, Black people, wait, what are they doing? They're trying to go somewhere. They're trying to do
Mm-hmm.
something.
Mm-hmm.
Let me go ahead and remind them what this is, right?
Yes, yes. Why do you think they are in front of courthouses? I think that why are they in front of capitals?
Right.
You can look at I'll remember his name in a second, but the speaker who spoke at the dedication for Silent Sam, and he says out loud, forgive me for the long-winded analogy, but a few years ago after Appomattox, just a few yards that way, I horsewhipped a Negro wench who insulted a white woman in the street. And she rushed to this university for the protection of the federal guards. And I whipped her pleasingly in front of their eyes. Right? Like, if
Like,
you look at these
yeah.
documents, and I think this is a
Mm-hmm.
time for teachers to step up, right?
Mm.
When I learned about primary source documents as a student, it was just so that we could score well on the test. But teachers now have an opportunity to be like, the work of freedom fighters has always been going back to the sources, finding the receipts. Like what was Ida B. Wells doing? What was Du
Mm-hmm.
Bois doing? What is Baldwin doing? Like the work of democracy, specifically Black folks working for democracy, has always been trying to find the truth, right? So teachers have a really dope opportunity right now to frame digging through these primary source documents as the work of democracy. And it is so easy to go to universities, especially in Virginia, universities and
Mm-hmm.
historical societies, and find the original documents for all of these monument associations. You look up a specific monument and then, monument blank, Stonewall Jackson Monumental Association. You can find those papers. And for a lot of these speeches, they're not just talking about the glorious cause. They're outright being like, hey, remember when we used to whip Black people, how dope that was. And that is a
Right.
moment for us to connect those dots. Imagine being able to surface that as a ninth grader or as a freshman, to be able to connect those dots, to be like, this stuff was never neutral and this stuff has
Mm-hmm.
always been counter to democracy.
Absolutely. So
Right? Like, I
like
feel like
going,
our early
yeah, right.
arguments were like, this hurts our feelings. Like, my early arguments were
Mm,
like, this hurts my feelings as a Black person.
right.
But I feel like
See me.
you have to see me, but I feel like
Mm-hmm.
Charlottesville and New Orleans are examples of like, this is counter to democracy, right? Like all the
Mm-hmm.
terrorism that stopped New Orleans monuments from coming down, that was flying in direct opposition to a democratic process. Unite the Right happened in
Yeah.
direct opposition to y'all doing the same thing that New Orleans did and deciding in
Mm-hmm.
a democratic process, this is what we are doing. This is our moment to say, this is not just offensive. This is not
Mm-hmm.
just dumb and counter history. This is corrosive to democracy.
Right. And I think that it's so interesting to think about how that same idea and those actions of like being corrosive to democracy, being domestic terrorists, can also be hung next to an American flag that says, I'm so American, I'm so patriotic that I'm willing to die for what I believe this country should be. Right. I'm willing to put on these clothes, have these outfits, right? Because I mean, racism is as American as apple pie, right? It's so American that when you fight racism, people think you're fighting America, right?
Yes.
That's how ingrained it is, and I
Yes.
think that's something that gets lost in kind of the arguments, because the initial arguments again are like kind of the empathetic argument, right? See me as a human. See, this hurts me. Your kids and I go to the same school. This hurts. Why? Like, I mean, can you believe me on that? And you have kind of like another argument of like, do you understand that like when you break down who is fighting against like the will of a democratic nation, who is fighting against the spaces in which people want to be seen as humans, and you'll find time and time again it's white supremacy, you know?
I mean, spoiler alert, the journey of this film is me over the course of 5 years figuring out who those arguments are for. And the fact
Mm,
is that when we make those arguments, see me, I'm a person. How do you explain this to a Black child?
right.
See our history. Please go look at what was written, what these men wrote down. Please go look at how every moment that is popular for this monument is a moment where they are subverting democracy. Those arguments are not for white supremacists. Those arguments are
Mm,
not for professors who even softly subscribe to white supremacy. They're not for your uncle who's like, but it's history, right? Those arguments are for folks in the middle, and those arguments are for kids. right?
Yeah.
That half of their, you can do the hour count in this film, and ultimately I hope that's one of the takeaways of the film. You can do the hour count in the film where I am lost believing that if you just have the right graph, if you just mention the
Mm,
right quote, if you just
right.
put forward enough empathy, that folks who are still dressing up like it's 1860 will see you. And I think we are all aware now that I think that that
Mhm.
is a fiction, and one that my dad laughs in my face at in this film.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, he seemed to have known this for a while. He sounds like my dad. He seemed to have known this for a
Mhm.
while, that this has been BS for a long time. And this is, we're glad that you're finally catching up, as in kids that have kind of been surrounded by this and just been brought up, but like we've known this for a while.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. Black
mhm.
dads who are like, okay, welcome to the party. Now you're in your 20s and
Yeah.
30s, and you get you get why I was, putting printouts about Amadou Diallo and Abner Louima on your desk when you were in middle school. Like, I think sometimes
Right.
you gotta let. I think it takes some black children a while to accept that fully,
Mm,
especially
mhm.
if they're mixed, especially if they, grow up in white spaces.
Absolutely. And so one of the things that was actually, as we're even having this conversation, it was really hard, because I watched the film last week, and last week was just a blur for me. I mean, it was just, I was foggy. I'd mentioned to Ziana, like I was like my trauma knew what day it was, but I didn't know what day it was. Right. Like it was August 11th, and I was meeting with my boss, and I was like, I'm just out of it. I can't do anything today. And she's like, it's August 11th, right? And I'm like, oh my God, I didn't have, like, there was no forewarning in my face or anything like that. So I wonder for you, like, one, what was your experience like on August 11th and 12th, in 2017? And then two, like, did you kind of have some of those same kind of experiences, of like being brought back up in your life, of like, oh wow, and this time feels, it has a certain grasp on me.
Yeah, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
It's different because I don't live in Charlottesville.
Mm,
So the horror of those days for me was that I went there because I was like, oh, I am making a film about the monuments fight and what happens when white supremacy tells democracy to wait. And, groups of white folks are like, you're not going to take our statue. And we had a happy ending to our film,
right.
right? It was spring of
Mm-hmm.
2017, and the monuments came down, and we knew that our ending shot would be the pedestal, and sounds of Take 'Em Down marching and cheering, and that is a film that reminds people of like the power of collective action.
Mm-hmm.
um and then, sort of as a postscript, I wanted to be like, okay, let's get something that sort of shows that, just at the very end of the film, maybe even credit sequence, okay, the fight moves on. And
Mm-hmm.
also, there was something I thought strategically important for the film about the veneer was off, right? These were
Yeah.
avowed white supremacists. It wasn't like, well, history's complicated. It's like, yes,
Mm,
white people are the chosen people. These are our
mm-hmm.
monuments.
Mm-hmm.
So, I wanted some of that evidence in the film. Um, so that is to say that it is a horror that I was passed through just for 2 days, and not one that I recognize that the trauma is different. Of It is not my city, having to
Mm-hmm.
see that come to my city, and it is not my on the ground relationships of being like, this is what was done to us, and now how do we build back. um, but I do think that the time every year is definitely brings me to a place, and the reminders are also really visceral, right? So, um, my moments of thinking about Charlottesville a lot was actually at the removal this year,
Mm,
and the moment that I wasn't ready for to be brought back to was one of the days of the Capitol riot hearing, um, just a couple weeks ago, and being
right.
like, oh, I didn't watch this live. Let me catch up on this Capitol riot hearing. And then just watching the video, uh, I broke down and was just crying because it feels the exact same. It is the
Mm,
same sounds. It is the same, you know, the same terror of, and I think it is the same terror in daylight, and a thing that, you know, this 11th, 12th, 13th, I found myself really seething with anger about and was not able to voice it, was how angry I am at the police in Charlottesville, of thinking about every piece of footage I have from that day, every picture is of the police doing nothing. And thinking about, you know, even how we talk about police in sort of this moment. I think the dichotomy with which we talk about police right now is about how over policed we are versus how nothing was done to stop the Capitol rioters. But I think that Charlottesville fits and should fit firmly within that conversation of, yo, all you had to do was block that park, right?
Yeah.
Like, they told you that they were coming. They told you for days that they were coming. Like, all you had to do was do your police job. You know, was to treat these white supremacists like you treat 10 Black Lives Matter protesters holding a sign. Like, you just had to be that forceful and vigilant, and y'all did nothing. And so I have memories of things that are really terror filled, but I also have memories of just lines and lines of cops just standing and doing nothing.
Yeah, I mean, it was, God, to think back on that day. I mean, there were state troopers, I mean, everywhere, right? It was just kind of like descending upon Charlottesville, as well as like being in the surrounding counties of like just ready for another hundreds and stuff like that, right? Just to come in case things got really bad. And it's like, and we were like, why did we have to even get to that point, right? Like, why did you not prepare in advance? Again, you knew this was happening both in the Capitol riots as well as in the Charlottesville riots. Like, both times there was multiple Facebook groups, there were multiple people. Like, you were in on the know to know exactly what these people were going to do, and you either didn't take them seriously in what they said they were going to do, or you said, well, it's not really going to be that bad, right? You just kind of said, meanwhile, again, you have Black Lives Matter protesters around the Capitol, and you can't even get on the stairs, right? I mean, there's lines of police that are even blocking you from walking past the Capitol, let alone breaching it. And so I think that just the dichotomy of it all is just like, that's so hard to be able to grasp that and put that inside this conversation and say, how can you even begin to think that we are seen as equals in the eyes of the law, in the eyes of policing, in the eyes of anyone that has been in charge of this nation? How can you begin to see that when you know deep in your soul that if there was if you put black faces in the Capitol rioters, right? You put black faces on, like, in Charlottesville, like,
you have one group of Black online folks talking about, we're going to come to Charlottesville with guns. And ATF and FBI is knocking down their door the next day. So and also remember 2017, you know, like they have like whole staffs within the FBI trying to figure out how to classify Black Lives Matter as a terrorist organization. And you have literal terrorists being like, we are going to come to this city. Here is our terrorist plan. And you're like, let's just see how this plays out.
Yeah, we're not too sure. Oh, come on.
And it is not the dichotomy of like, oh, look, we have to go to separate frames to see how they treat white supremacists and how they over-police Black folks. You have Black, brown, queer folks saying, please, for the love of God, protect us. Please do not let this come to our city. And you have that inaction, and you know, it is not my city, but it is. I think all the time about what could have happened had those city officials done what the citizens were asking them to do to protect them. And I think that's part of the conversation about policing, about not just who is over policed and y'all got to treat, you know, white terrorists like you treat Black regular people. It's just like, who do you protect, and what is happening when citizens are saying, for the love of God, please protect us from white supremacy.
Right. I mean, and you can even see in the pictures and in the videos that the police were protecting. I mean, you can slice it any way you want, but they were literally they were guarding the white supremacist, right? They were in front of the white supremacist, making sure that the Antifa and Black Lives Matter and people that were just fighting for humanity were not harming or interrupting their sanctioned protest, whatever. Like,
They were
it's just
protecting the statues.
right.
They were protecting statues. Whenever we finish this film and all the work that we are trying to work with as many teachers as possible. If you're a teacher, in the chat, holler at us. We're at It's Not Neutral. You can just Google the Neutral Ground PBS and you'll find our website. But get with us. We are trying to spend the whole next 2 years working with as many teachers as we can who are like, hey, can you help bring that film into our classroom? Can you help give me some better resources for teaching about secession, or a way to teach slavery that actually makes Black kids feel free and powerful and full of agency? All of our work is going to be with teachers. But whenever we finish that work, I swear I'm going to start a museum exhibit of just years and years of cops surrounding statues while protesters are saying, please protect us. That's what they were doing in New Orleans. That's what they were doing when Alton Sterling was murdered. That's what they were doing during Charlottesville. There's probably thousands of photos in the summer of 2020 of Black and brown people saying, please protect us, and the cops saying, step away from the statue. And that is not going to hold up well in history. The idea that millions of people spilled out into the streets saying, please protect people over property, and cops were very clearly like, no, property, please step back from the property. That's not going to hold up well. And please come to my museum of photos of cops protecting statues.
I'm sure it's going to be quite a large museum. For sure.
Advanced tickets now be open 2030.
Very nice. I had a question. One of the things I was thinking about, and this is someone that, like, I went to University of Richmond. My dad still lives in Richmond. And one of the things that he and I were talking about is the Robert E. Lee statue. I wasn't supposed to say his name. The statue at the Marcus Davis Peters
I love
Circle,
it. The statue
right?
of the slave owner who will not be named, who definitely
exactly
war.
So that statue, when
that dude
I
who
went
sucked
there,
at Gettysburg,
right?
Yes.
When I went there and I saw that statue, it made me, and just being inside the MDP circle, right? Just being there, seeing the community garden, seeing the basketball, seeing people playing chess and laughing and joking and spray painting onto the statue, like, that feeling to me was so empowering, to say we have reclaimed this space, right? To say that we have taken something that was meant to hurt us and we are showing, George Floyd's picture, projecting it onto the statue, right? We're showing the ways in which this will not, we would not let this, tell only one part of this history, right? We've seen the way, and that's the only one that's really like that. All the other ones have been cleaned up and they've been, they're just the pedestals now. But, like, what are your thoughts about, like, that statue and kind of the way in which it's been, like, there's a Black Lives Matter flag that's, like, hanging at his feet, right? Like, what are your thoughts about that statue and kind of, like, the ways in which, sure, it's still caught up in the courts and everything like that, but, like, keeping the statue up or taking it down, or, like, what does that look like when it comes to the reclaiming of a space and being able to say that we are here to show what you will not let us, you don't steal our joy from us?
I think we are hungry for models of positive space, right? So we know what it is like to have a void, right? Have a void in our history and our energy and our ability to see ourselves, and white supremacist monuments represent a void, right? So sort of an energy field sucking all the joy away.
Yeah.
We are hungry for models for positive space, right? It's the reason that folks talk about Kehinde Wiley's monument, Rumors of War, so much, because for once it is like, damn, that's us. Like, that, I feel power looking at that. It is separate from a tradition of another Martin Luther King statue or another Rosa Parks statue. There's no shade against those statues, but that is a model of architecture and visibility, I think, that is kind of what we grew up with in the 90s of
Mhm.
great Black heroes, right? So I think I am excited for the public art students, the artists who are coming to their own in this moment, because they are literally able to solve a problem of history, right? The problem of Confederate
Mm.
monuments. Confederate
Yeah.
monuments is a problem of aesthetics, partly, right? That it is the most enduring piece of art, the most racist, oppressive piece of art. The idea that you can lock a story into stone and no one can move it for 100 years,
Hmm.
right? So I think this generation of designers has that challenge before us about, like, you see severed heads in a monument of severed heads in on the Whitney plantation as a monument to the 1811 German coast slave uprising, right?
Right.
A lot of people don't like that monument because it is traumatic to see
Hmm.
disembodied heads. I like that monument because it is a statement both of, it has clarity about white violence. There is no
Mm. Yeah.
euphemism about what was done.
Right.
And it also reminds folks that this was an army, that we had an army
Mm.
of hundreds of enslaved Black people who rose up, tried to kill their masters, and end slavery in 1811. But someone will create a better monument than that. All that is
Mm.
to say, we need models for what it looks like to see ourselves embodied and celebrated in space. And when I saw what had been done to reclaim that space as community space, right? As the neutral ground, the name of our film is about how
Yeah.
that space is supposed to be for all of us. The way that I saw how organizers and citizens had turned that into a memorial for Black folks slain by police. And they're like,
Hmm.
yeah, you want to talk about the men who never returned home? You want to talk about the widows who had to piece together a society when a third of their men didn't come home? Yeah, let's talk
Right.
about it. This is who we're talking about.
Hmm.
I thought that that was incredible. I
Yeah.
think what is tragic is that if I am not wrong, there is newly in the past couple of months a fence around it, keeping citizens out. That stuff was
Yeah.
like forcibly removed from that space, and there was a fence there.
Yeah.
And to me, the fence is its own new monument of state power,
Right.
right? The fence
Right.
was like, yo, Robert E. Lee, you think you are the ultimate, symbol of state
Hmm.
power erasing Black people? Hold my beer. We're gonna
Yeah.
put a fence around this, remove all this beautiful stuff under the
Hmm.
pretense that you're gonna damage the monument. Like I think that is a statement on its own. But I think
Hmm.
that monument should definitely come down. I think,
Hmm.
folks are going to reclaim that as a community space, and it is also a model for everyone in these cities, being like, how do we reclaim these spaces?
Absolutely. I mean, I saw the Kehinde Wiley one when his exhibit was in the VMFA, which is down in Richmond, the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts. I went to go see it. It was a little bit after like my undergrad experience, and it was to me the first time I had ever seen art, like ever really seen art, not just kind of walked through a museum and said, oh yeah, there's these people, this is an oil painting or whatever. But when they had the special exhibit on Kehinde Wiley and his, I mean, again, just massive 10, 15-foot tall, like paintings with intricate details of like these Black people on horses, like, in Timbs with like swords, and just it was something that I really thought I had seen art for the first time. And I love the way that, again, that's the reclaiming of it all, right? In the same way I felt with the Rumors of War, right? Being able to see that. And I even had like my hairstyle the same way that the guy did at that time. And I was like, this is really me. Like I can really see and feel myself in this. And so I love the idea of like the reclaiming of spaces and the reclaiming of what you're going to kind of allow, right? Like what are you going to be able to say? Like this is like, we don't agree with that. This is what we think this should be, right? This is our space and this is how we're going to treat it. And this is what we're going to give back to what has been taken from us. And
Yeah,
I
I
think
mean,
that's just so incredible.
I think that is, you know, I was in my feels for a while on this film because I got mad every time folks would say, we must reckon as a country. And I'd be
Mm.
like, who is we? White people need to reckon. Black
Right.
people don't need to reckon. Go get your breakout, get the breakout room together of the white people to go talk about your history, and you reckon. This false we is making me angry. But then I came to a place by the end of the film, by 2020, where I was like, no, we need to reckon. And what reckoning, I think, this is still a working idea, but I think reckoning work means that you hold white people accountable for white violence in history, that you force white people to talk about that and to acknowledge their connection to it. That's it. Talk about it, acknowledge your connection to it. That's what reckoning work looks like for white people. But that reckoning work is not done unless it also returns something to people of color, non-white people, that has been taken from us. Right? So what that looks like at the end of this film, also spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen it, but this is one of my favorite things, is that the film partly ends with Dred Scott, the artist Dred Scott, did a reenactment of the 1811 German Coast Uprising. And when you see something like that, the amount of speech and visuals and time isn't spent going, hey, remember white supremacy? Let's talk in detail about white supremacy, right? It is just, hey, remember when we were powerful? Remember when we did this ish? Remember when we marched hundreds strong to end slavery? And to me, that's a model of positive space, right? Like that vibe is what you're seeing when you're seeing a black man embodied with dreads embodied on a horse. So that is to say that, you know, even my film is a learning project of the first half of that film is spent chasing white supremacists, trying to show them documents about white supremacy, trying to confront their lie in front of their face. But then there's a moment in the film that turns where me as a character gets exhausted by that and is like, oh my God, what could we accomplish if we are not focused on trying to talk to white supremacists? And I think that is trying to convince people that white supremacy is real. You know, I think that's a question that can help save a lot of us some time of how do we spend our time when we are not trying to convince white supremacists that white supremacy is real, right? So what can we get done in classrooms if we are not trying to chase some governor, but instead we are like, yo, governors are going to act a fool and pass dumb laws, which is any law that tries to make our kids dumb by preventing teachers from teaching history. That's a dumb law.
Right.
But
see Texas, for example.
See Texas, see Florida, right?
See, exactly.
But instead of like chasing around and shaming these governors, like go put Black Reconstruction in the hands of a teacher, right? Like go put Clint Smith's new book in the hands of students. It's called How the Word is Passed, right? That if we are not focused on Lindsey Graham, how dare you look at the history, like this fight about, do not be mistaken, the fight right now, the lost cause right now is coming to take all of our history. There are states where it is illegal to teach our film, right?
Wow.
The lost cause lives and breathes now. And the core of the lost cause has always been about, do not tell the truth about our past. These fools in 1860 were saying the schools and the press is allayed against us. They are we should be truthful about the history. Like these fools in 1860 were trying to keep us from teaching the truths about slavery. That is the fight now. They are trying to make it illegal for history teachers to teach history. The Republican Party is, after spending a decade trying to use academic freedom so that some professor can say the N-word to his students on a campus, is now subverting all of their ideas about academic freedom so that they can keep students from learning where the N-word comes from, right? Like they are passing dumb laws so you can't teach history. That is the fight. And my question is, and my invitation is, and my request is, how do we do that in a way that does not waste time on white supremacists and gets to the heart of the matter, which is raise your hand if you are a teacher out there who has access to kids and are serious about teaching kids the truth. What books do you need? What funding do you need? What support do you need? How can we get you this film? How can we get you a film like Silence Sam that was made about the UNC students? How can we get you films that are still being made in Charlottesville about the Charlottesville story? So that is all to say, let's get focused on teachers because that's the fight.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. I mean, I'm an educator. I'm an educator that works like within the outside the classroom and getting kids what they need. And I think that when you have those spaces, and we're trying right now to get like a Charlottesville history to be told for the tragedies that have occurred here, and also the great things that we've done as a city to fight against those tragedies. And so I think that that's incredible. It's exactly where we need to go. If anyone here that's like listening and you all are tuned in and you're really excited, you have questions, go ahead and submit those. We'd love to hear them and just kind of hear from you all what you all think. I mean, either let CJ or I can answer just something just to kind of help us to close out. But I mean, one of the questions that I had was really thinking about, so going back to New Orleans and knowing that the Jackson statue is still there, right? I mean, and that is iconic, right? That is like, if you type in like New Orleans, you're going to see the Catholic cathedral with Jackson in front. Like that is one of the like 7 pictures of New Orleans. There's like the French Quarter, that statue, like the Harrah's that's like across the street. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's, that's New Orleans. And like, what do you think about like, because Take 'Em Down is still trying to get that taken down, right?
Yes. Take 'Em Down NOLA is the group who's like, we have not forgotten who's in our film and, you know, who initiated all of this takedowns in New Orleans. They are like, we have not forget, you know, they have a list on their website with all the monuments and street names that have not been, you know, renamed. You know, nationally, Southern Poverty Law Center reminds us that we have over 2,000 Confederate monuments and memorials, streets, school names still standing. Over 2,000.
Wow.
I think we should feel hope about that because, you know, 300 have come down since the Charleston massacre, half of which have been since the lynching of George Floyd. So it's like, dang, we can move fast when we want to.
Absolutely.
But I think a closing question that I hope haunts us all is, where do we stop short? Right. So Mitch Landrieu being celebrated for taking down 4 Confederate monuments was leaving office, still defending the Andrew Jackson monument. Right. Because Andrew Jackson had a pivotal role, you know, saving New Orleans from the British in, you know, the Battle of New Orleans. But Andrew Jackson was also known as an Indian hunter in his time. His cred for exterminating Native Americans is what made him president. He is the creator, the author, the executor of the Trail of Tears. So I think, you know, I think once the box is open, we have to follow the argument, right? And some scared white folks ask, what, should we take down all the presidents? They are not asking that as a genuine question. They're asking that to close conversation. But I do think that is the question that should open conversation, right? Like I'm not saying you got to come for all the Thomas Jeffersons tomorrow, but I'm saying we as communities, not just the South, but across the country, have to talk about how Thomas Jefferson was a rapist and a slaver, right? And if you have those honest conversations, then communities will make their own decisions about their monuments, right? If you can have an informed conversation about what Andrew Jackson did in New Orleans, what will happen with his monument, I think, will be self-evident. So I think that is, we could waste our time with 1,000 think pieces going, well, what should happen to Jefferson? What should exactly be the wording? But I think the conversation should be, how do we have public conversations about Jefferson, about Jackson, you know, about Columbus? You know, I'm calling you from an apartment where just a couple blocks away, you know, in a time where Columbus monuments came down across the city. Shout out to folks joining us from Richmond, where Columbus was thrown into the lake. Shout out to folks joining us in Boston, where Columbus was beheaded and thrown in the harbor, right? But Columbus still stands proud in front of the Whole Foods in New York. So it's like, can we talk honestly about these men and about our past? And if we can talk honestly, then I think the statues will take care of themselves.
That makes a lot of sense, because it's you're you almost feel like you're answering your own question, right? Just as you said that there's people that will be able to say, oh, well, are we going to take down all the statues? Are we going to do, who's next, right? That was one of Donald Trump's lines. Who's next? If you take down, is George Washington going to come down next? We're going to have to take down the Washington Monument. And it's like, when we need to have an honest conversation.
It's like, maybe.
Right.
For real?
I don't know yet. We're not even
Maybe.
there.
Imagine if you got some clam chowder in a restaurant. And you were like, hey, I need to send this back because this is clearly spoiled. Imagine if the restaurant owner came back and was like, what? So you want me to check all the milk products? Well, if I throw out the chowder and acknowledge that the milk is expired, what else do I have to throw out? Do I have to throw out all the expired meats? You'd be like, what? Or if you were like, doctor, can you please, the biopsy has shown that this is cancerous. Can you please take out this tumor? If the doctor's like, fine, but that's all I'm doing. Please do not expect me to look for where else the cancer is spread. What, am I going to have to do a whole scan of your body, take it out everywhere? It's like, yes, that is the work. Right. And even more, Kimberly Crenshaw, who's the mother of critical race theory and intersectionality. Shout out to Kimberly Crenshaw, having a tough time of it right now. But she has this incredible analogy, which is just like, we all know that asbestos is in a ton of buildings because it was a popular building material. Asbestos is also poisonous. Right. So builders now are like, we need to figure out what schools has asbestos in it, and we need to remedy that and take it out. Imagine if Republican governors passed laws making it illegal for us to use the word asbestos, saying it was divisive for us to even talk about which buildings have asbestos, because then do we have to take down the White House? It's like, we should be able to look for where the asbestos is. And the assault on teachers that is happening right now, and the panic about critical race theory, which is a 50-year-old word, all of this is to keep us from looking for the asbestos. It is robbing us of the language we need in this moment to articulate the injustices that are happening to us now. Don't teach about voter disenfranchisement and Reconstruction so they can't look at what's happening in Georgia now. Every piece of history that would be silenced by these laws are history that we vitally need to see what is happening to us. 18 bills have been proposed that are dumb laws. 18 bills have been proposed that are voter suppression laws. 10 of those have been dumb laws as well, right? So like, the fight is not just about what is the plaque that we should put on the statue. Should the statue go to the museum or should it go to the graveyard? It is, what are the ideas that are keeping that statue in place, and how are those ideas still undermining our education system and undermining our justice and voting system in ways that is not apparent when we're talking about, now, where does the Robert E. Lee Monument go from here, Shannon?
It's a great question, because I think that we can easily get our wheels spun around that, right? We can whip around the axle, just kind of thinking about, what does this like piece that does need to be removed, right? That does need to, but that's just the beginning, right? It's the deeper, it's the cultural issues that allowed this to be put up in the first place, and then continues to allow this to stand without question, right? Yes. And those are the things that like really challenge us to think deeper, when you answer some of the deeper questions, like you said before, the answer to the simple ones about statues or names of schools or whatever, those are self-evident, right? Yes. That doesn't, there's no longer a question about whether or not we should be celebrating or how we should be referring to this person and the tragedies that they committed. It becomes self-evident because it's like, well, if we believe, right, in empathy, understanding, and honestly, and liberty, I changed my email saying to liberty, justice for all, right? Just to kind of play at that word, just to kind of say, we mean justice for all. That's what I'm fighting for. That's what I'm here for, right? It's not this idea of like, oh, justice for all, but really, if you're these people, it's all, right? So then let's make it mean all. Let's make it mean something, and not just pretend to dance around the topic or pretend to dance around and say this is what we really want to do or what we don't want to do. I think that when you have the deeper conversations, that's really how you get to the solutions.
Yeah, I think a perfect frame of that is Confederate monuments are not the cancer. Confederate monuments are one tumor. The cancer is a denial about how white supremacy has infected the country.
Right.
Right. And if you are so narrowly focused on just this one tumor, like, you're going to miss it. We need to be asking what are the institutions that cancer is also going to show up in.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And you can see it's asking the questions, but also we're getting the evidence right in front of us, right? We're seeing people that you see the cancer showing up in voting rights, see the cancer showing up in the naming of things, sure, but you also see it in the history that we tell. And over and over again, right? White supremacy is defended just like it was the statues from the police, right? Like just the same way. It's like a carbon copy of like protect white people, right? Defend the Americanness of whiteness, to defend the humanity of white people, defend what they want, what they stand for. And you take that, you try to dismantle that, and that's when you get stuck behind laws, right? You get stuck behind the ways that have been propped up, that prop up white supremacy all around us. And so I think that like it's so, I don't know, it's so important to really investigate what we're teaching people, and then really making sure that we're allowing the true history. Again, this is not even like we're trying to teach fake things. We're not trying to like tell
We're
them
literally
anything
trying to
that's
teach
false.
what these white supremacists wrote down.
Right. I'm not making this up. I will give you the words, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the important lesson, is really making sure that we're focused on that. And I love that for you, that became the kind of like the lesson, or the takeaway from the movie was like, there's no longer I don't know, a fight that can be had with white supremacists, with people that are no longer listening, right? When you get to a point where you're no longer listening, and you won't even go to a slave museum because you said it's just a bunch of lies, right? Like the guy in your movie.
Yeah.
Like when you're at that moment, you realize that there's me spending my time and effort trying to convince you that slavery was real. That's not helping the situation, right?
Yes.
We need to teach people so we don't recreate, just like with UVA, right? Teaching, so we're not recreating a Richard Spencer, right? We're not recreating these students that are able to go through an entire system of elite education and whatever, to then come and lead a group of people back to the same town that they were a student at, and then try to burn it down with tiki torches. And like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, there's an educational part that needs to be taken into account that really dismantles the way that we're addressing these issues.
Yes. I mean,
sorry, that wasn't a question at all.
I'm struggling about if this is a responsible thing to say, but a personal feeling that I have is that those white supremacists who came to Charlottesville is what happens when a society teaches its kids that we're in a post-racial moment. Right? That like the ages of those folks who came here.
Yep.
So many of their parents were baby boomers. And some of those parents got interviewed on the news and were like, I don't know how he got this way. We didn't raise him to be like this. It's like, well, you did raise him to believe that race isn't real.
Right.
And you did raise him to believe that racism is over and ended with Martin Luther King's dream, and that it's all fine now. So if you do not raise a white child with tools to understand what white supremacy has done in this country and what it continues to do, and you raise that white child to believe that everyone has the same stuff now, and therefore black people are just sort of must be complaining about some made up thing, of course they're going to be open to extremism. So there were absolutely KKK, League of the South, the most avowed sort of classic white supremacists there. But I do think in terms of reckoning, white parents need to be reckoning with the price of what happens when they do not teach their kid about whiteness.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's exactly how we get with the situation that we're in, and what what has led to people believing that this is okay and not being corrected, right? When they're saying these abhorrent things, when they're believing, and don't let a white person have something taken away from them, or have a disease or something. The same thing I was listening to.
Yeah, you're right. You don't
Richard
need
Spencer.
a dad who's using the N-word to become
Right,
Richard Spencer. Right?
Oh, no.
You just need a dad who never talks to you about that race is real and racism is real and whiteness is a privilege,
Right, exactly. Because you then believe, again, if everything has been given to you, or you've been had a path that's been laid out, right? That's allowed for you to move through society in a certain way, and then you're stopped, or you're seeing that there's people that are getting the job you were supposed to have, or things like that. And you start to question, wait a second, I'm supposed to be, this is my stuff. This is my dream. I wanted to go to space.
They are replacing
whatever,
us, yes.
right?
Yes.
Right, exactly. So then you get to Jews will not replace us, and you're realizing that it's a pretty easy way. Even that kid, I think it was really interesting to see the kid that, and I didn't know this was you that filmed this, but I'd seen that kid before, the kid that took off all of his, his white neo-white supremacy outfit of the khakis and the white shirt, and was like, this is, I don't really believe all this stuff. I mean, like, I kind of believe it, but like, I'm not willing to like fight for this, right?
Yeah, the exact quote is, I just came for the fun.
Yeah.
I just came for the fun. I'm not a real white supremacist.
Right. That's miseducation. That's the people that would let him leave the house, or let him continue to espouse these things. He's talked to people about this, I imagine, right? His parents, his family, his friends. When we don't correct these, when we don't have honest conversations about race and racism, you're left with nothing, right? Yeah,
that's what you get, right? Like, I'm open to being challenged on that narrative. It could be wrong, but I don't think the story of those men should be, oh, racism has always been with us and it bubbles up. It's like, no, this is a specific consequence of raising an entire generation of white men with zero tools to understand their whiteness.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that this is, for you, and thinking about kind of the future, right? We've talked about this a little bit before, with teachers, with taking down the remaining statues. Where do someone watches your video, right? They say, like, this is an incredible documentary and a documentation of the history, both of how we got here as well as where we should go from here. Where do you think that people should kind of put their energy towards? Like, where should we go after seeing this video? You're gonna have some white people, it happens every time, right? White people get real excited about seeing something. They get real excited about a video that makes them feel like, I need to do something right now, right? What's kind of the action step for those people that may be asking that question to themselves?
Great. The first thing I'm putting in the chat, the first I put in the chat the Venmo link for Take 'em Down NOLA, and the Venmo for Ziona Bryant, who many of you know as, being responsible for, in high school, being responsible for getting Robert E. Lee taken down. And so a question that you should, if you haven't watched The Neutral Ground, you can watch it just by Googling The Neutral Ground PBS, the name of the film, The Neutral Ground PBS, and it'll take you right to PBS so you can watch it. But I think when you watch films like this, when you watch any social justice film, you should, and you feel a good race feeling, when you feel like, dang, we are going to make it. We are okay. It does feel good to see ourselves. I think the first thing you should do when you finish any film like that is ask yourself, how can I support the people on the ground in the film? So you should first thing you should do is you should open up your Venmo app and see how much you want to give to either of those groups. And then also, are there other groups in the film? The New Orleans Slave Marker Project, that you see that you're like, dang, I want to support that work. So the most direct thing is not just, we can't see these films and be like, dang, that was the work, seeing the film. It's like, what are you going to do now with the film? So number one is, how can you support those organizers who are in the film? How can you support other, folks who are doing similar work in Charlottesville? Take 'em Down Seville, the Memory Project, like folks who are doing that work really close to home. And then the last thing I would say is just help me show this film to a teacher. Just pass this film to one teacher, right? They are literally being blocked by the law from doing their job. And any piece of press I get, any moment that we have as a film, any power or platform that we get as a film is going to be spent either helping fight off these dumb laws and legislation that are coming for our teachers, or trying to help connect teachers to better curricular resources or whatever they need to teach the Civil War, Reconstruction, slavery in a way that reminds kids that they are powerful, that white supremacy has always been with us, and that we can defeat it.
Yeah. Thank you. I really do appreciate that.
And thank you everyone on the call who's a teacher.
Yes. Oh my goodness. I've done some teaching, summer school teaching for half a day. And I don't know how teachers do it with 8 kids. I was overrun. I couldn't do it.
Do it with love and power, baby.
They do. They really, really do. Yeah. So thankful for teachers and thankful for you. Just for being here,
Daniel, and thank you for all your work in the world. You're incredible.
Of course. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be a part of the fight. I feel like I had a bunch of questions listed out, but we just kind of had a conversation, and it was great just talking to you.
We did the thing.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if there's anything you all have any questions about, obviously the Virginia Film Festival, and then let us know. I mean, we're here, but I'm just excited to have this opportunity to speak with you, and looking forward to sharing this. I'm not sharing. I'm going to the superintendent. I'm talking city council members. So I'll
say it right now. If you say, oh, my producer's gonna hate this. If you say that you are on the Zoom Virginia Film Fest event with CJ and Daniel, I will come to your school. I will come to your school. Let's do it. We don't. Yeah. It can only be 24 people tops. 24 participants tops. Can say that they were here without lying. But no, actually, we were up around 40, 50 earlier. But I will do whatever I can to come to your school. I'm not saying I'll come right. I can't come right away because we're taking the film a lot of places, but. That's your cheat code. Say you're on this call with Daniel and CJ, and I'll try to get to your school.
Wow. Man. And I got something out of you. This is what I'm talking about. This is a great interview.
Yeah, you're like, I just wanted the freebies, baby. That's why.
Right, man. I got some promises and everything.
Yeah. My producer's going to be like, you promised what? Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. If you're teaching kids about Black freedom, and that white supremacy has been with us since the beginning, and we can beat that ish. Let's go. I'll come to your school.
Yeah, right. That's the work, right? It's doing those things that are uncomfortable, putting yourself in spaces and being able to say, we're going to be here, right? And the sticky and the weird and the everything. Let's talk about it. Let's get real deep. So I love it.
Cool. Thank you so much, Danielle. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for